Good afternoon. You have just viewed the concept video of built environment. And I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome one and all to our webinar dialogue on built environment, which draws from an exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Manila. We are equally happy to co-host this event with Japan Foundation Manila, our exhibition partner, and welcome our JFM friends, Ms. Tomoko Nakamura, and the new JFM director, Mr. Ben Suzuki. We are fortunate, of course, to have with us this afternoon our distinguished panelists and speakers, including the exhibition curator, Mr. KURAKATA Shunsuke. Moderating our dialogue this afternoon is architect Emmanuel Miñana, a principal of EA Miñana and Associates, and the first Filipino architect shortlisted in the prestigious 2014 World Architecture Festival. Architect Miñana will introduce each of our panelists before their respective presentations. As a point of reference, however, for today's program, we would like to take all of you on a virtual tour of the exhibition, inasmuch as the museum remains closed, unfortunately, until further notification, when you will all be welcome to the museum on its reopening. Join us now to view the virtual exhibition.
The Japan Foundation Manila and the Metropolitan Museum of Manila, in cooperation with the Embassy of Japan in the Philippines, present Built Environment, an alternative guide to Japan. Featuring photographs, text, and videos designed to mirror the country's unique archipelagic formation, the exhibition presents a total of 80 buildings, civil engineering projects, and landscapes from each of Japan's 47 prefectures, extending from the modern era of the late 19th century to the present. Japan is an archipelago that stretches from north to south. So many regions in the country have a full complement of seasonal changes and are also distinguished by highly diverse geographies. Moreover, Japan frequently experiences natural disasters such as earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, tsunami, and typhoons. As a result, Japan's architecture, civil engineering projects, and landscapes strongly reflect these conditions and adapt to them. Within this context, the exhibition focuses on the structures that are deeply connected to its land and Japan as a nation. Curator Kenjiro Hosaka shares that these are the built environments that were conceived through modernization and Japan's period of high economic growth, which includes those that were born in response to the destruction brought about by the surge of developments. There are also built environments that were created as a means to regenerate the community against the reality of population and economic shrinking, as well as built environments that have been maintained by sustainable practices that distance themselves from the speed of change. Remarkable examples of built environments consider the space in a long-term span, and it is interesting how, as a result, they give rise to sustainability. Even in terms of iconic architecture, their so-called value is transformed when considered from the perspective of built environments. Take, for example, the Nakagin Capsule Tower, which changed the people's image of living in the city when it opened in 1972. To this day, the building's numerous passionate advocates are engaging in activities to sustain the rapidly aging tower, such as hosting a series of guided tours of the building. Therefore, one could say that over the course of time, the relationship between the architecture of Nakagin Capsule Tower and people has in itself taken a course of change. Built environments are not places that remain unchanged, and this is why they provide opportunities for new discoveries upon revisiting. In other words, elegant design and sophisticated technology are not the only things that make Japanese structures interesting. This exhibition sets out to evaluate them as the product of a dialogue between Japan's geographically diverse and environmentally vulnerable spaces and the historical and social context of the people who occupy them. As curator Satoshi Hachima shares, in addition to these geographical factors, we consider complex social phenomena such as history, economics, industry, technology, natural resources, and international relations. Thus, the story that led to the creation of Japan begins to take shape. What new dialogues have occurred between the time Japan entered the modern era and today, after a period of high economic growth and the bubble economy? An architectural historian, a landscape design scholar, and an art curator examined this question from many angles and created this exhibition to function as an alternative guide to the country, providing viewers with a deeper understanding of Japanese history, environment, and culture, as it touches on aspects of Japan that have not been widely introduced in the past. We hope that this exhibition can also contribute to a meaningful dialogue with Filipino audiences, given that both countries share the same archipelagic formation, diverse geographic features, and a vulnerability to natural calamities. In the time of this global pandemic, our relationship with public and private spaces have vastly been altered, and more than ever, ecological issues urge us to reevaluate how we organize and construct human society in relation to the wider Earth. As we move towards recovery and into the future, the exhibit brings into the forefront both natural and social phenomena that continually inform and constantly shape our built environments.
Good afternoon. I'm Tomoko Nakamura, Assistant Director of the Japan Foundation Manila, and we are honored and pleased to work again with our longtime partner, the Metropolitan Museum of Manila, for the Built Environment, an Alternative Guide to Japan exhibition and webinar. The Japan Foundation Manila has been fostering friendship and ties between the Philippines and Japan for more than 2 decades in 3 fields: arts and culture, Japanese language, and Japanese studies and intellectual exchange. We hope that this webinar in Japanese and Philippine architecture brings deeper understanding about the two countries and encourage future collaboration in the field of architecture. I would also like to use this opportunity to introduce our new director for Japan Foundation Manila, Mr. Ben Suzuki, who is also watching our event with us. I'd like again to thank our partner, Metropolitan Museum of Manila, Embassy of Japan in the Philippines, and our sponsor, JET International, as well as our Japanese and Filipino speakers and moderators. Thank you all for coming to our online event today.
Thank you, Tina and Nakamura-san. A big welcome to all our participants. We would like to introduce our first speaker for this afternoon, who is one of the curators of the Built Environment exhibition. Professor KURAKATA Shunsuke is Associate Professor in the Faculty of Engineering at Osaka City University since 2011, where he teaches architectural history and theory. His primary research interests center on architectural ideas in modern Japan, including his doctoral dissertation, Study on the Architecture and Philosophy of Chuta Ito, 1867 to 1954. He also published numerous books on popular architecture and is the co-founder of Access Point Architecture Tokyo, a cultural resource on architectural education for the public.
皆さん、こんにちは。倉方俊介と申します。構築環境展の、何人かで制作した人の一人です。で、このビルドエンバイロメントで構築環境っていう言葉ですけれども、自然と人口っていう二項対立というよりは、自然と人口が、どのように掛け合いながら私たちを取り囲む環境を作っていったか、そういったことを、具体的な建造物を通して、再検討していきたいということで、この企画を、作りました。で、まずですね、これが日本っていう国を対象にしています。で、日本っていう国の、地理的、あるいは、いろんな、その環境の豊富さというものを改めて、この100の建造物、建築物から確かめていきたいということが目的としてあります。そして、そういった人口と自然の関係性というのが、今後未来にどうあるかという示唆も、この過去を振り返ることの中にあるんではないかということが、この展覧会の、目的というふうになっています。今、こうした非常にインターナショナルな災害の中に私たちがいますけれども、この、コロナ禍の、中で、あるいは後に、どういった私たちの暮らしがあるかということに対して直接にお答えする展覧会ではありませんけれども、しかし、この直接に答えるのではないということ自体が、これからのコロナ後のあり方、私たちの生活のあり方を示しているような気もします。そのあたりもちょっと、講演の最後にお話をしていきたいというふうに思います。これ、今回の、ガイドブックになりますけれども、日本は世界の中でこの位置にありますね。で、ちょっとまず日本の概略をちょっとお話ししていきたいと思うんですけども、結構日本っていうのは南北、それから東西に、国土の割には長い国です。そして、標高差というのも、そこそこあるというか、こういった富士山という、単独の山としては世界でも有数の高さを持つ山と、それから周りは海に囲まれてますので、そういった0メーター、あるいは0メーターより低いような地域もあるということになります。そして気温も、かなり寒いところから、結構暑いところまで。今私、大阪というここにいるんですけれども、大阪も今日は、摂氏38度まで上がってますので、熱帯と言っていいような気温になっています。そして、ちょっと時間軸で見ていくと、これ戦後ですけれども、第二次世界大戦後に、GDP が上昇していくわけですね。このあたりまで、高度成長期というのが1972年頃まであって、ぐーっと伸びていって、このあたりから低成長というか、安定成長の時代になって現在に至ります。その間に、 結構公害問題が起こっていって、こういった公害、工場から出た排水とか、そういったものが人の健康を害するということ、これを日本も1950年代から60年代に経験します。でこういったことも乗り越えながら、現在があるということになります。そして、日本は世界の国土の中では面積は十分小さいんですけれども、地震の数でいうと、結構世界の、5分の1ぐらいを占めているわけですね。そして、地震だけではなくて、台風とか、いろんな災害が、襲ってくる。これは東南アジアも同じだと思いますけれども、こういった災害、自然災害の、損失というのも非常に大きいということがあります。ですから狭い国土の中で、多様な気候風土がありながら、割と多くの人が密集して暮らしている。そこに災害がいろいろ起こってくると。そういうふうな国土であるということが改めてわかるわけですね。そしてちょっとここから少し歴史順に、日本という国がどういうふうな、建造物を通して、自然と人口の間の調和間、間の構築環境を作っていったかということをお話を、いくつか手短にしたいと思うんですけれども、これは白川郷という、山の中にある、日本は、伝統的には米を主食としてきました。農業が、中心でした。第二次世界大戦後までは、農業に従事する人が一番多かったわけですね。しかし、山が多いので、あまり平地が少ないところもある。そういうことで、これは非常に急勾配の屋根がこの自然環境の中で、ある種調和するように立ってますけれども、これも、狭い平地の中で米を生産して、米の生産だけでは食べられないので、ここに蚕を飼って、その蚕の、絹の原材料になりますから、そういった副収入を使いながら、ここで大家族、大きな家族が暮らしていった。そういうふうな自然風土の中での生き方が、こういった形になっているわけです。そして日本が1854年にアメリカと初めて開国の条約をして、それからそれまでの鎖国を解くわけですね。それから明治時代という近代が始まっていくわけです。そして近代になると、新たな技術が導入されていて、西洋の技術が導入されて、例えばこういった京都という、ずっと、1000年以上都があった場所ですけれども、その京都に、水を引くために、こういったアーチとレンガの技術で、これお寺の境内、仏教寺院の境内にこういうものをゴーッと通していくと。こういった土木技術、西洋の土木技術というものが、国をさらに国の姿を変えていくわけですね。そういったものを最初は外国人に技術を学びながら、日本人が作って、また日本人が教えてという、そういうことで日本の国内を近代化、西洋化するということを自分自身でやっていきます。これは1901年にできた、九州にできた関越八幡製鉄所という製鉄所ですけれども、こういった製鉄所に多くの水が必要なので、その製鉄に使う水を引くための人工の湖を作って、そこにこういった橋を架けて、こういったものもある意味美しいですよね。でこういった人工のものが風景の中に新たな景観を生み出していく。こういったものが西洋化、近代化とともに国土の各地で行われていくわけです。そして、日本の歴史を語る上では、第二次世界大戦というものに、最終的に、負けるわけですね。これ1945年の8月6日に世界で初めての原子力爆弾というものが広島に落とされます。先ほどの、製鉄所があったのも、あれは工業、あるいは軍港として有名な場所ですけども、広島も工業と軍に関係する場所なので、原爆が落とされていくということになります。そして戦後に復興していく。その中で日本は、特に戦後は、植民地を、失いますので、また4つの島にぎゅっと、主に4つの島にぎゅっと固まっていく。ですから多くの人口がまた集中していく。でそこで平地が足りないということで、こういった八郎潟という大きな湖を埋め立てるっていうことをしていくわけです。これもやっぱり国土を変えていくわけですね。そして、1960年代終わりになってくると、 まあまあ豊かになってくるので、こういった高い山、2450メーターのところにリゾートホテルを建てるということもしていく。ですから、国土を増やし、こういった高地までホテルを作り、そして、4つの大きな島、北海道、本州、四国、九州という4つの島をトンネルとそれから橋で結んでいく。こういった土木技術によって、狭い国土の中で交通を盛んにして、戦後発達をして、もう一回復興していくということがあります。そして最終的に1972年にアメリカに戦後統治されていた沖縄というものが返還されていって、沖縄っていうのは一番日本の南の端の島ですから、台湾の少し北ですね。ですから、こういったところで新しくできた市庁舎なんかは、こういう風土的な、建築、地元の材料とか、それからデザインを生かしたような建築も建てられていく。ですから、こうざっと見た写真でも、雪があれば熱帯みたいなところがある。そういったさまざまな風土の中に、国土を書き換えながら、人口の環境を作っていったという日本の経験がわかると思います。もちろんこれは世界と共通しているわけですけれども、ただいろんな、北の国とか南の国とか、水が多いところとか少ないところとか、いろんな経験が、ある意味ぎゅっと凝縮されたのが日本という国ではないかなというふうに思います。で、こういったものをどう理解していくかというときに、一つは進歩主義的というか、要するに近代化西洋化に成功した証として、こういったさまざまな建築や土木があるというふうに、進歩主義的に、こういったものを叩いていく、捉えていくという見方が一つあると思います。もう一つは、もっと自然主義的というか、進歩主義的ではないというか、要するに、その自然というものをこの人工物が、書き換えてしまった、壊してしまった、あるいはそういうものによって公害や、そういうことが起こっていった。ですから豊かさと引き換えに大事なものを失ったんではないかと。そういうふうな考え方もあるわけと思うんですね。しかし、この人口と自然、あるいは開発と、保存というものは、相反するものでもないということが、こういった事例の一つ一つを見ていくと、すごく改めてよく分かってくるわけです。例えばこれは渡良瀬貯水池という、ラムサール条約にも2012年に登録されている、すごく水鳥が生息する国際的にも重要な地です。そこに生物多様性が存在するという、関東の栃木県というところにある渡良瀬遊水地というところですけども、これはもともとこの近くの足尾銅山という銅を明治になって採掘をして、そのおかげで銅を採掘して、その銅と金属が周辺の流域に流れ込んで、日本で最初の公害を起こすんですね。で、そういった渡良瀬のこの、遊水地というのは、その足尾銅山の鉱毒、鉱山の毒を、沈殿するということと、それから治水の目的で、整備されたんですけども、ですから公害があって、そういうこともきっかけになって、人工的に作った遊水地が、今では自然の多様性が、最も存在する場所になっているということになります。それから、この浄水場、これ東北の岩手県にある、浄水場、米内浄水場という浄水場ですけども、これは、昭和の1934年にできた浄水場です。盛岡で最初の浄水場ですけども、これは砂でゆっくりと水を飲めるように浄化するというふうな、システムです。今はもっと、強制的に浄化するので、多くの水が、すぐきれいになるんですけども、でこれはただ当時は最先端のもの、この地方で初めての浄水場ですから、これ当時流行ったアールデコのスタイル、建築のスタイルなんかも取り込んで、やっぱり近代の、非常に成果を誇らしげにデザインにも反映しているわけです。技術だけじゃなくて、その技術の優秀さというものを視覚的にもアピールしていくような、そういった第二次世界大戦前っていうのは世界中でそういうふうな土木施設が建てられますけど、これもそういうものですね。でただ、今ではちょっと時代遅れになったやり方、最も効率がいいやり方ではないんですけども、ただ、これも、最近だと2011年に、東日本大震災という大きな地震がありまして、そうすると停電したりするわけですね。で、この 浄水のシステムっていうのは電気を必要としないわけです。ゆっくりやる代わり、重力で沈殿するので、その電気を必要としない。ですから、こういったやり方っていうのが、ある意味大震災以降見直されています。それから、発展途上国なんかでも、こういった技術っていうのが、使われたりしている。ですから、技術というのは単純に進歩するわけでもなく、進歩して良くなるっていうだけではなくて、やっぱりいろんな突発的な災害に対して、やっぱり強靭な対応ができるためには、実は最もある状態のところに効率がいい技術というだけではない技術というものが、実は重要なんだということが、災害がいろんな多岐にわたって、起こる、あるいはそういったものが多くの影響を与えるに従って分かってくるわけですね。そういうことが見直されています。これは建築ですけれども、これは筑波センタービルという、日本で最大の、人工都市にあたるのが、東京から、50kmぐらい離れたところに、新しい都市を作りました。で、これは磯崎新という、国際的にも有名な建築家が設計をしていますけれども、この筑波研究学園都市っていうのは一番その計画主義的な、建築あるいは都市の最大のものです。つまりある目的、東京が一極集中で、非常に勉強にも仕事にも、非常に良くない場所になっていると。だから人工的に1960年代から計画を練って、筑波に第二の、副首都にあたるものを作ろうということですね。そういうことでスタートしたのが、1980年代になってようやく完成するんですけども、そういった中で、歩行者と車が分離した、非常にある種近代都市計画の模範みたいなものを実現してきます。ただ、そこに、磯崎新という人は、ちょっと歴史主義的な、その合理主義的な建築ではなくて、歴史主義的な、合理では割り切れないような建築をデザインしています。ただ、これも実はその歩行者のレベルと車のレベルが、上下に差があると、高さに差があるということを利用して、それをデザインの中で解消しようとしていたりとか、つまり計画主義的なものにそのまま乗るんでもなくて、ただそれに単に反抗するんでもなくて、計画してたものの、ある種想定してなかった余剰みたいなものを利用して、デザインの、奥深さ、あるいは意味の多義性に結びつけています。でこういった、ある目的のために作られたものが、それがそうではない価値を帯びるということが、歴史上あるわけですね、存在するわけです。最後ですけれども、これは臼ジオパークというもので、これは北海道である、日本が火山列島であるということを示すために、大きな地殻変動による被害をそのままの状態で保存展示しています。そして防災まちづくりの啓蒙拠点になっています。ここは実際、そういった噴火という突発的なことに対してのある備えっていうものを、計画的にもちろん行うんですけれども、それだけじゃなくて、その過去にあった痕跡をそのまま見せることによって、一人一人に考えさせるっていう、そういうふうな施設になっています。ですから、このように見ていくと、やっぱり単にある方向に進歩していった証というものが、こういった構築環境展に展示されているものっていうことでもなく、あるいは自然が最高だってことでもなく、やっぱりその多様な経験が我々の国土の中に実際存在しているということを見ることによって、その自然のある種不可抗力に対して新しい環境を形成していった具体的な経験というものが読み取れるわけですね。でその具体的な経験というのは、これは、単なる観念的なものではないので、非常にそこから得るものっていうもの、そこから何を見出すかということは、やっぱ時代とともにまた深みを増していくわけです。ですから、このコロナ後の、コロナ禍の、分かったことっていうのは非常に単線的だったり、ある目的のためだけに作られたものとか、目的のためだけに行っている行動っていうのは、何かその前提条件が少し変わると、非常に機能しなくなってしまう。例えば、いろんな建物でも、あるいは観光産業に依存するっていうことでも。そうすると、やはりいろんな強靭さを持っている必要がある。その強靭さというのは、一つのものだけに、全部ある前提のもとだけで計画をしないということだろうと思うんですね。ですから ある不可抗力みたいなものも含めて備える、自然の不可抗力も含めて備える、そういった、国土づくりのあり方っていうものをこれからさらに考えるためにも、そういったことを国土、その構築環境というのは行ってきたわけです。ですからこの具体的な経験をやっぱり改めて見直しながら自分たちで自分自身で今の人がその意味を捉えていくっていうことが、最も大事な今後への学びなんではないかなというふうに思います。この展覧会が、いろんな読み方ができると思うんですが、ぜひ、日本っていうものの多様性を通して世界の多様性というものに、ものを理解する、一つのきっかけになってくれればなというふうに思います。はい、これで、講義の方を終わりたいと思います。
Thank you, Professor KURAKATA, for giving us a comprehensive look on Japan's built environment. We would like to introduce our next speaker, who will share with us one of his projects in Ofunato Iwate. Architect Kurokawa Sho obtained a master's degree at the Academy of Architecture in Mendrisio, Switzerland. He founded Shokurokawa Architects in Tokyo in 2014. Since then, he has been working for various design projects and educational activities in Japan, China, and Switzerland. He is a visiting lecturer in Keio University and one of the founding members of Japan-Swiss Architecture Association, JSAA, a cultural and technological exchange platform established in 2018.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm Sho Kurokawa. I'm an architect. I have my own office in Tokyo, and I have my projects all over Japan and some in China. Not a lot, but scattered. And as I understood your situation of today in Manila, the exhibition, the built environment will happen only on the virtual environment. I think it's very creative challenge, and I hope I can be of some help to understand our challenge towards nature in Japan. And yeah, so before coming back to Tokyo and start my own office, I was in Switzerland, and I've also in Belgium working and studying. And Switzerland, a country on the mountain, and Belgium, country without mountain. The highest mountain in Belgium was not even a hill in Switzerland. So there they really had the different attitudes towards nature and the different disasters as well. And not that I tried, but I was involved. I was involved to some disaster relief projects in my life, and this is the one I did with Shigeru Ban in China after the Sichuan earthquake, and we built a elementary school there in Chengdu. Here's me, and somewhere here is this is also me. And we worked with our friends, university friends from KU University, and also the local university students and also local teachers team. They even didn't speak English, but we somehow made it after 8 weeks, 3 buildings of paper tube. And now I want to introduce my project I did after the East Japan earthquake in 2011. Here, this is Japan, and this is the site. And this is Tokyo, by the way. And this is the site. The whole coast was strongly damaged after the earthquake and tsunami. And this is the site. And this, town is called Ofunato. It's and this orange area was where the tsunami water reached. And this white point is where the facility was located when tsunami came. And this is where the temporary shed for them was located. But since this is a facility, a kind of workshop for mentally and psychologically disabled people, the government didn't allow them to stay in this orange area. They are forced to move on the hill. and they were looking for the architect. They were also trying to make a kind of funding project. And I was appointed by the kind of a support organization for this after earthquake activities. And this is their temporary shed workspace. And this is the new site. It's quite a kind of pastoral condition where before it was right in front of the ocean, basically. But now we're in a sort of like a hill. And I placed a building like this, the white one. And this is basically the whole design is a result of negotiation between the philosophy of their organization, of the client, and the given condition of the project. Given condition meaning the budget, the schedule. The budget was really tight, schedule was not really enough, and the environment. And also kind of, how to say, the way they want to settle in this new environment after this very, very difficult experience of this tsunami earthquake. And so therefore, I almost didn't try to make it beautiful. But it came out as a beautifully boring or beautiful banal building, but still interesting space, I believe. So this is the outcome. The entrance needed to be really, how to say, obviously entry condition, because they need to, the people here, users, needed to be ready to work when they came in this red canopy. But still, I didn't want this building to be sticking out in the environment. So if you see from the front, it has certain presence, but from the back, actually, it almost hides itself in the terrain, in the fields, and in the mountain. And this is the plan. Basically, this is a workshop space and at the same time dining space. They wanted to maximize this space. Still, they needed a lot of rooms for cooking and preparing and counseling and offices, toilets, so on. Therefore, I tried to minimize the circulation space. Rooms are next to each other without any corridor space. They're connected to each other directly. Therefore, I could make the maximum floor for this dining and workshop main space. And in this main space, it's full of different conditions, from the low ceiling room space and high ceiling space, the space with full of light, space with less light, space without the view to the mountain, space with view to the valley, so that people here can work in the morning, for example, here on the valley side, and maybe have lunch on the mountain side, and work in the afternoon on different conditions as well. So there they have choices, not like before in one room without any characteristic, but now they have choices where to work, where they feel comfortable in this very limited floor though. And yeah, the spaces has different, how to say, heights on each elements. Only the beam stays, and also the lighting condition stays. But the windows, ceiling, acoustic condition, lighting condition, winds, everything changes in this one very limited room. And in the small rooms here, I put some small tricks. The wallpaper has slightly different colors. Therefore, if you come from the yellow room to the blue room or the other side, because of our eye effect, the space looks slightly different. There also, it's a kind of trick that the people can feel wider or more different, more variation in this limited space building. And after the completion, it was an opening ceremony. More than 100 people came, and we sang, we danced, we really had a good party here. And a year later, I brought some, musicians to the building, and we had a small concert. And now it's a corona thing, and I cannot visit them so often, but so far we have very good a relationship, and they send us apples, send us some other fruits. I often call them, say hi, any problems on the building, so on. So, and this is the night view. It almost disappears in the environment. It really doesn't say anything. It really is a building that looks like staying decays here, and it seems the neighbors also accepted this building well. And this is the all I prepared, and somehow I hope you see one of the example that we architects, especially young architects with this limited tiny projects in the disaster relief condition, that architects could make certain amount of meaningful challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Architect Kurokawa, for giving us a walkthrough of your work on the Employment Support Center for Disabled People. Let us now hear from our Filipino panelists. Our next speaker is the chairman of the Emergency Architects of the United Architects of the Philippines. Architect Joe Miranda's design and build practice in Manila, Mindanao, and Central Visayas developed his interest and practical knowledge in the effective use of local and indigenous materials. He has recently taken up the task of heading the UAP Emergency Architects, actively involving in solutions in resilient building and alternative temporary shelters, while working with stakeholders towards a better organized disaster risk reduction and management community in the country.
Good afternoon. I'm Architect Joe Miranda of the United Architects of the Philippines, Special Committee of the Emergency Architects. I'd like to share with you today our study on the application of alternative temporary shelter systems into the conversion of public spaces for temporary community quarantine and isolation spaces. In the aftermath of Typhoon Haiyan in 2013, a collaboration among CSOs, Accord Incorporated, CARE Philippines, and the Emergency Architects wrote about a menu of options for alternative temporary shelters. The produced models were primarily intended to form part of local government's disaster risk reduction and management contingency plans, where deployment options can be programmed for either stock prepositioning or on-demand procurement. A matrix of design criteria were formulated to build up a strong set of attributes in functionality and construction so that models are adaptable to most disaster scenarios, robust and reusable, and scalable to adjust to differing magnitudes of applications. Paramount also is the practical selection of materials so that they are available in most locations and are cost-effective. Construction methodologies were brought forth towards simplest procedures with most minimal challenges in replication. To this, we added a component of a progressive design development iteration process where choice models are promoted in communities for deployment and testing. And end users themselves are encouraged to participate in the layout and publication. The experience in constructing and actual utilization of the models allow them to take active part in the process of evaluating performance and feedback on issues that help designers in effective assessments to improve and fine-tune the ATS models. Certain emergency events necessitate the need to improvise further in design to meet such challenges as immediate deployment, limited space, and budget constraints, such as in the 2 succeeding fires in dense housing areas northwest of Manila in 2018. A system of partitioning spaces previously introduced in classroom evacuation with the use of PVC pipes to divide the room equitably for 5 to 6 families, and using plastic or tarpaulin hanged on the PVC frames as partitions proved functional for transient sheltering, augmented by communal wash facilities. The system is then applied to larger indoor basketball courts that maximize the temporary covered court partition facility to shelter 100 families. The organized spaces provided a good measure of relief, privacy, and dignity for the evacuees. It is significant that partner CSOs, Accord and CARE, recorded the successful evacuation camp coordination and management with the essential participation of the community in the planning and execution processes. The scalability and cost efficiency of this temporary covered partition system that simply makes use of PVC pipes for frame, connected by clamps and roofing screws, duct tapes, and screwed fasteners to attach tarpaulin partitions, factor in positively in the present scenario of the pandemic and addressing gaps in lack of facilities for community quarantine and isolation spaces. As local governments put primary priority to monetary aid to communities locked down and unable to work, budget for construction of facilities stands at the rear in the funding queue. A consortium led by Accord Care initiated the piloting of a public facility conversion to a community quarantine and isolation facility, reference from previously developed alternative temporary shelter system. A 940 square meter multipurpose roofed assembly court within its civic center was provided by the local government of Malabon as part of the city's solution to the issue on quarantine spaces. The facility will accommodate COVID-19 operations, relieving the city's primary level hospital to focus on regular admittance. If prevailing conditions worsens, this facility will have the capability of converting into a functional treatment facility on top of its immediate purpose of a localized staging area or immediate transfer to secondary and tertiary level hospitals. The modular nature of this system allowed for the progressive spatial programming of the facility to comply with the recent guidelines outlined by the Philippine Department of Health and the World Health Organization of the United Nations in infection prevention and control, circulation, controlled zoning of areas, wash facilities, and assistive provisions for pregnant women and persons with disabilities. Further consultations with local doctors from Malabon Hospital were also critical in determining specific needs like in-house medical activities with code blue capability to accommodate most levels of confinement. Additionally, due to Malabon City's vulnerability to natural hazards, supports were installed to help brace the introduced structure against winds. Emergency architects put in particular attention to IPC, manipulating the flow of air within the naturally ventilated environment to be directed to a buffer space of considerable size on the leeward side of the facility where exit air particulates could dwell to settle on the ground after being exhausted by prevailing draft out of the facility. Materials used in this intervention can easily be dismantled, stored for reuse in other future emergency events. Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Architect Miranda, for sharing with us the vital work of the UAP emergency architects, especially in this time of the pandemic. For our final presentation this afternoon, we will be hearing from Tao Pilipinas, a women-led non-government organization that provides technical assistance to urban and rural communities. Our speaker, Engineer Lorena Hernandez, is a licensed civil engineer. In 2015, she started working for Tao Pilipinas as Human Settlements and Environment Program staff, where she monitored Tao's post-Haiyan shelter assistance projects in Giwan and Salcedo in Eastern Samar. She is now the project team leader for technical assistance to a community partner of Tao, supervising the construction of core houses and leading a project that utilized renewable energy technology in community facilities.
Thank you again for inviting us to this webinar. Today I will be sharing our experiences in co-designing with disaster survivors in island communities. So our project is a post-disaster reconstruction in the municipalities of Salcedo and Giwan, Eastern Samar. This was funded by Tarede Homes Germany, Christian Aid, and Philippine Missouri Partnerships Incorporated. As we all know, Typhoon Haiyan devastated a number of regions in the Philippines, and it actually made its first landfall in Giwan, Eastern Samar. So Giwan consists of small islands wherein the houses are made of light materials. Tao Pilipinas were first asked by PMPI to conduct or participate in the post-disaster needs capacities assessment for the assessment of the housing situation in the islands of Monicani and Gumunhon. So after the completion of the PDNCA report, Project Pagbangon was conceived. So in Project Pagbangon, Tao Pilipinas was tasked to implement the shelter and evacuation center component of the project. So in the shelter component, 40 beneficiaries were selected in Manicani Island and 80 beneficiaries were selected in Homonon Island for the permanent shelter construction. In beneficiary selection, the stakeholders like the barangay council and other community members were all involved in the process. So after finalizing the list of beneficiaries, Tao Pilipinas conducted the house design workshop. So the house design workshop starts with a series of lectures about the design standards and various policies and guidelines for designing a disaster resilient house. So you can see in the middle photo, one group of community participants are doing their 3D housing design unit. And then for the right side, you can see the outputs of the workshop, which are the housing units and housing schemes that were designed by the community members or the housing beneficiaries. the housing beneficiaries were asked to vote for their most preferred scheme. So here are the housing designs which were constructed in Manikani on the left side and Monhon on the right side. The elevation of the finished floor line from the natural grade line depended on the results of their risk assessment. So for example, you can see in the Manikani, the moderate risk houses have been elevated by 1 meter, while in Humonhon, for the moderate to high risk areas or houses in high risk areas, they have been elevated by 1.5 meters. The dimensions of the houses in Hanikani is 5 meter by 5 meter, while in Humonhon it is 4 meter by 6.5 meter. So both houses have provisions for rainwater harvesting, wooden jalousie, 400 millimeter eaves, and then we have kitchen counter, septic tank, toilets, and they have all made from reinforced concrete and then wooden trusses frames. Meanwhile, in Barangay Cagaot and Salcedo, which is the neighboring or adjacent municipality of Giwan, the barangay or the local government unit were able to identify a low-risk area wherein the 23 housing beneficiaries will be able to construct the houses. So as you can see on the top right photo, there is one of the community members who is discussing their site development plan to the other community participants, and in the photo below that is the community members were also discussing their house design. So similar to Manikani houses, this design of the houses in Cagaot is also 5 meter by 5 meter, and then it also have provisions for rainwater harvesting. They also have hip roof. They also have reinforced concrete design components and wooden jalousie, septic tank, toilet and baths, kitchen counters. So after the construction of the houses, we also have conducted this house extension workshop wherein the community beneficiaries will be able to know, or they will be able to construct their own house extension designs, and so that they will not compromise the structural integrity of the core houses. For the evacuation center provisions, these are the photos of the winning schemes after the community participants underwent design workshop. So these are the typical design for the evacuation centers in Manikani on the left side and Homonhon on the right side. The evacuation center in Manikani is 10 meter by 10 meter, 2 stories with a deck, and in Homonhon it also is 10 meter by 10 meter, but it has a hip roof. So both designs have their own septic tanks and toilets and rooms. The design for the Manikani, it also have rooms for clinics and such. So Cagaot and Matarinao, or the two barangays from Salcedo, they also adapted the design of the evacuation center in Manikani. So we also promote the use of alternative building materials. In Barangay Cagaot, we use the interlocking concrete earth blocks and micro-concrete roof tiles. The interlocking concrete earth blocks were used for two duplexes in the shelter project, while all the roofs in the 23 houses constructed had microconcrete roof tiles. These microconcrete roof tiles were locally produced in Giwan, and then they were transported on site, while the interlocking concrete earth blocks came from Cebu. They were sourced from Cebu. So aside from that, we also have this project wherein uh, we have constructed a daycare center for a community, Sama sa Isip, in Isla Pulo, an offshore island from Barangay Tansana, Botas, wherein they also use wood wool cement board and then microconcrete roof tiles as alternative building materials. This was constructed in 2011, but by 2017, they were relocated on a nearby site, which is also in their barangay, but on the mainland. So the whole island was deserted. Due to the process or since this is panels, the wood cement boards can be disjointed and the um, microconcrete roof tiles can also be taken off just by cutting the nylon strings that were used to attach them. Um, we were able to use or reuse these materials in one of our community partners in Masagana area, Barangay Pulongyantok, Angat, Bulacan. So this is their, as you can see on the bottom left of the picture, you can see the community-based resource center of the community. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Hernandez, for sharing your people-centered projects in Eastern Samar. We would like to now open the floor for the question and answer Q&A discussion. Send in your questions via the Zoom Q&A box and the Facebook live feed comments section. We actually already have two questions here. The first question is from Alden Monzon of Kyodo News. How do you see the current COVID-19 pandemic and other possible future pandemics affecting the future of architecture styles and sensibilities? We can direct this to any of our panelists.
I can start.
Yes.
For our case, since we work with the communities, we're actually also, I think we're curious about how this pandemic would change their perspective, since we let them design their own houses. And yeah, and since, even earlier, disasters and pandemics have changed how people design. Like for example, during the cholera pandemic, we the professionals looked at the sanitary facilities more, and I think that's all.
I see. I think one of the things that was discussed by all of you communally was that designs have to be very flexible, yeah, very malleable to be able to adapt to the changing environmental conditions. We have another question, and this is a question for Kurokawa-san from Tony De La Cruz, sent via Facebook. What specific features of your building are disaster resilient? What adjustments did you make in the architectural design or structural design to ensure that the buildings can withstand future tsunamis and earthquakes? This is for Kurokawa-san. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Did it work? Okay, good. Yes. Very fundamentally, when I look back what I did for this project after 3 years, I found out I'm not doing anything so specific. I didn't change my attitudes because this is the disaster relief project. In a certain way, I do always like this, let's say, quite seriously. But if I give you a very direct, concrete answer, the room serves evacuation, the possibility to be an evacuation space for disabled people. That was really important for the client, because when tsunami happened, that kind of evacuation shelter, sometimes elementary school, gymnasium, all those town hall spaces, they do host the citizens, but mentally or psychologically disabled people, it was really hard for them to stay in such a space strongly related to the other people's lives. Therefore, the client, most of the users of that facility could not use those shelters. That was one of the important, a feature of that project to prepare for the next disaster. Apart from that, nothing really special. In a very positive way, I can say.
Kurokawa-san, how has the response of the public been around the area in terms of accepting your building, using the building, and really making it a part of the fabric of the environment and their city?
That was really the important point during the design as well. That kind of facility will not be always really welcome in the neighborhood. Not like the other industrial facilities, but people there makes sometimes noises and cars are coming in and out. But when the building was built, the client, one of the client's team, they told me that the building fits so well in the fabric, in the existing fabric. That was the highest possible compliment for me as a designer. That kind of silver, galvanized steel facade and those windows waving, a little bit of a design thing. In the end, the client could think that fits really well in the context, and they're happy with that. They don't they don't have too specific presence as a building.
Thank you. Thank you. We have another question from Zoom as well. With the growing frequency of disasters, man-made and natural, and this could be answered by any of our panelists, how do you see temporary structures redefining design practice of different scales from architecture to the larger urban built environment?
じゃあ、私からいいですか？はい。
I can answer the question.
すごく災害っていうのが、さっきそのテンポラリーなものをこう築くという災害に対して、一時的なものを築くっていうことがすごく重要だってことが、特に、ジョー・ミランダさんの、講演でよく分かりました。
While ago, Ms. Joe Miranda stressed the importance of temporary infrastructure for disaster.
である意味で言うと、今はすべての構築物を、テンポラリーなものっていうふうに考える方が標準ではないかっていう、ことが言えるんではないかと思います。
I think it is okay to say that it's a standard to see all the infrastructure or temporary things.
つまり、しっかりと、状況に即した、ある一時的なものが作れるような基盤を構築しておくってことが、これからの建築関係者に必要なことではないかというふうに思い 至るのです。
I think it is important for the architecture and professionals to see this, to build this base as for the infrastructure to cope with this disaster.
それは災害の増加ということも原因ですし、それから社会の変化というものが急速かつ方向性に予想がつかないということが理由になります。
The two things that I want to mention why it's temporary, because things are changing. Society changes so rapidly right now. And at the same time, the direction of the changes, we cannot predict. It's the direction is the direction that we cannot foresee.
ですから、ニューノーマルの時代というのは、ノーマルじゃない非常時というのを特別視しないで、ある意味で言うとニューノーマルというのは全てがなんていうかな、ノーマルじゃないというか、非常時に対するテンポラリーな備えを行っておくっていうのがニューノーマルの時代の構築物だというふうに考えています。
So I think it's what I understand is new normal is a normal right now. So we don't see new normal as a abnormal thing, but it's as always new normal. That's how we see it right now.
以上です。
That's all.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to highlight in this afternoon's webinar that we have over 490 participants watching from all over the Philippines. I'm seeing messages from Cagayan de Oro, Cebu, Bulacan, and even from faraway Singapore. So your wonderful exhibition is touching so many lives and bringing so much information, rich information. I have a little question again to Professor KURAKATA, and I wanted to ask you, KURAKATA Sensei, how did you bring together this very rich material and this? How did you conceptualize this exhibition so that the region and the world can understand more about the culture and the life of Japan as a country?
Thank you. 今どういう質問でしたっけ？
今回のプロジェクトに至るデザインとかですね、どのようにこのようなプロジェクトができたか、経緯ですね。先にちょっと。なるほど。
はい。結構ですね、最初からこういう全体像が決まっていたわけではなくて、その意味では進行するに従ってだんだんリッチになっていったっていう感じです。
It's safe to say that we don't have a grand scheme, the idea from the beginning, but as we progress, as we continue to doing this project, we came up with this rich ideas.
で、具体的に言うと、最初にそのアートキュレーターの保坂さんが私を建築の専門家として誘って、その後に土木の専門家の八間さんっていうふうな3人のキュレーターが集まりました。
So at first, our curator, Mr. Hosaka, invited me as he has a main concept. And then after that, I invited Mr. Hachima, who is a civil engineer. So that's how our project has started.
でその後に私も今回の展覧会はすごく、リッチだっていうふうに思います。でそれは、デザイン面が、優れているからだと思います。
I think this project has a rich design in this, and then especially this design has a really rich element.
でその3人の後に今度は4人目に、建築家の、人が会場デザインに加わりました。そして今度は5人目にグラフィックデザイナーが加わって、6人目に今回の最初の冒頭の映像作家、映像を作った映像作家の人が加わるっていう形で、数珠つなぎになっていきました。
And not only 3 core members, in the end, there's another architect joining to make the venue, and then another graphic designer coming in, and later on there's this designer for this the video that you have seen at the beginning of this session.
このような展覧会のコンセプトは私にとっても初めてでしたし、誰にとっても初めてでした。ですから、人が増えるに従って、そのコンセプトがより明確化していったっていうことがあります。
So as an architect, myself and other core members also, this is a first time experience to engage in this kind of disaster related exhibition. But as we go on, somehow the concept got the clear concept as we go on.
ですから異なるプロフェッショナルが協力することの大事さというのをこの展覧会そのもので知ることが我々も理解することができました。以上です。
Thank you. So through engaging in this project, different professionals like architect and the designer and civil engineering, we have different professions, but as we cooperate and engage in this project, we were able to learn and do the best in this project. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you very much, Professor Kurakata. We have another question from Roland Samson. And this is to anyone in our panel. The common mistakes of shelters built are the locations which causes more problems. Any tips, especially for the government leaders and stakeholders? So I suppose the location for shelters creates more problems. What tips can you give to government leaders and stakeholders?
Can I start? Okay, can I start?
Yes, architect.
I think it would be best if they would be able to consult the people first, and of course look at the surroundings and the hazards, because when you put people there, they have to live with the environment and the actual site conditions. So that.
Any other answer from Kurokawa-san or Kurakata Sensei?
そうですね。じゃあ私から。すごくロレンナさんの発表も感銘を受けました。
I was so amazed by the presentation by Miss Lorena.
私の友人で、日本人の女性母なんですけれども、アフリカのザンビアで、マタニティハウスというのをコンテナを再利用して作ることに、作ってる建築家の人がいます。
I know one friend who is a mother and she's a Japanese. She engaged in a project in Zambia. She engaged in this maternity house, and the materials are from the container.
きちんとシェルターがある、それはつまり出産の時の衛生状況が良くないので、それで乳児死亡率が高いと。で、そういうことをきちんとシェルターを作ることによって、乳児死亡率をまずは下げるっていう、目的があります。
In order to decrease the mortality rate of babies, when so those pregnant mothers come to this shelter and then give birth to a child, the most important thing was to decrease that kind of risk inside this maternity shelter.
でも、彼女に言われた話でやっぱり感銘を受けたのは、それだけではなくて、やっぱりきちんと居場所、シェルターがあることによって、やっぱり女性の、自覚というか、要するに自分たちに対する尊厳というのが高まるし、それから周りの人もやっぱりそういう妊婦に対する、見方が変わってくるっていうことが、やっぱりそれが構築物の力だっていうことに感銘を受けました。
I was actually amazed by her story, which she told me that as a woman, the maternity shelter is not only for the place that they give birth, but also gives dignity to those women who visit there. because not the shelter is important for them as a woman also, and to give the meaning to the community as well, to the community see the shelter as important as women.
ですから、ジョー・ミランダさんの話もそうなんですけれども、やっぱり適度に、隔離するというか、囲うことと、それからつなげることと、やっぱりそれを調整するような仕切りなりシェルターなりを作るっていうことは、これはやっぱり物理的なことだけじゃなくて、人間の尊厳にも関わる大事なことだっていうことが、特に近年よく分かってきたと思いました。以上です。
So as I saw your presentation, Ms. Lorena, I also agree that certain dividing the space is so important, not only for physical environment, but also to give dignity to the human, to the people who going to use or live in that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
May I add, Architect Miñana?
Yes, go ahead, Architect Miranda.
I just want to add to share the experience in Samar and Leyte. A lot or most of the projects that were successful in the post-Haiyan rehab are those projects which really included the community in the planning and implementation. While when we tried to visit post-Yolanda Samar, there were in fact some projects that were provided right away, right after during the rehab, but were not really occupied. You have this community already ready for occupancy, but the community shied away because one problem is that it would be some distance away from their source of livelihood. They're talking about fishermen that would be very, very difficult to relocate to another location. So I think it is evident that some discussion and inclusive community planning should really be done. One thing also is that there should be an assertion. You see, while it is true, there's a saying that beggars cannot be choosy, and during these times of disaster, a lot of relief and donation are coming in, and some of the donors just would like to finish the project, put it on record, and then get away with the record of. We noticed some of those really build communities in Samar actually that didn't quite really fare well. So the community should be able to articulate and speak out, emphasize their observation, use the democratic, be able to feedback and speak out so that their ideas can be shared for planners and politicians to really make use of it. Yeah. Thank you, Architect.
Yeah, thank you. I think what was so important that we heard this afternoon was disaster relief has to be flexible and it has to go to the people. And so it was very interesting looking at Architect Kurokawa's work with Shigeru Ban, where he used paper pipes to bring a framework, and how you, Architect Miranda, used PVC frames or PVC pipes to create also frameworks for shelter and structure. And it's an example of what Japan did and what the Philippines did, so that you can be very flexible to bring this structure to the countryside, to the people who matter as a response. Yeah. Well, thank you. We have a few more questions actually, and I'm just sneaking myself in, my apologies. But this is for architect Miranda and engineer Hernandez from Haruki Takashima, a Japanese architect working in the Philippines. Do you have any particular building code or guidelines in designing temporary shelter for emergency cases or resettlement facilities?
May I answer?
Yes, go ahead, architect.
Right. Okay, we do not have yet, but the building code is amply provided with provisions that really, if everybody just follows the building code, there will be less and less and less disasters. Typhoon, the new provision in the structural code of the Philippines provides for really details, to make the structures stronger for 250 kph, even provisions for earthquake. But yes, there is no standard for. It's a matter of really taking it from disaster experiences for us to be able to come up with temporary for alternative sheltering. The important criteria would be like sheltering has to come in within the next 24 hours. People that are displaced, they will need shelter right away so that you could address the next problems, like health and accidents, So there should be a way of, delivering, procuring structures for temporary shelters that could be deployed quickly.
Engineer Hernandez, can you add a little rejoinder?
Yeah, I agree with Architect Miranda. The provisions on our codes are actually very, it's actually meticulous, but codes are dynamic also. So it tends to be, it needs to be updated. And yeah, that's what's really important.
Right. Well, thank you so much, Engineer Hernandez. Time has gone by so quickly. We have time for only one or two more questions. We have another question from Megan Lim. What are some examples of COVID-19 response architecture innovations? And have you incorporated these in any of your present projects? To anyone in the panel. So architecture innovations for COVID-19. I mean, segregation, isolation, and are you beginning to develop that in some of your disaster relief structures?
For us in Tapuncinas, I think we haven't really moved to that part yet, since we are focused on helping our communities to donation drives and such, but we try to source locally as much as possible. So, but that's not design related.
Yes.
I have now. Can I answer to?
Go ahead, Architect Kurokawa.
We very recently completed one educational facility for Keio University in Tokyo. It's a tiny building, wooden structure, 2 stories, 400 square meters. But the campus is closed, actually. The spring semester, autumn semester, we will be doing things, basically everything online. But what I found important after this COVID-19 thing is that we lost some choices, but still we gained more choices, actually, to have a lecture from home, to behave like this or that. Choices that we couldn't make before COVID era. Now we know that it works. And the building we just delivered, has a lot of opportunities or like possibilities to customize. So if students, if they want to be giving lectures at the university, at the campus, on campus, they can build partitions, they can put screens, they can build their environment by themselves. I will be building our environment for my course at the shed that we designed at the university. It's an extremely flexible space with some suggestions to the next future interventions. It's about flexibility and resilience, but we got a lot of choices after this COVID thing, and we architects, I think we can provide chances to install the new choices in the space.
Thank you so much, Architect Kurokawa. You know, we're down to our last question before closing. And I would just want to say that we're taking note of all the audience's comments because there's so many of you and so many questions, and we'll try to answer them even after the webinar. I have one final question, and it's to Professor Kurokata, the exhibition's curator. You mentioned that in the 50s and the 60s, Japan began to overcome environmental pollution through progressivism, naturalism, and you created biodiversity, and therefore trying to go beyond the environmental malaise. Can you explain, was this government-led or private sector-led? The resurgence back to a cleaner environment.
なるほど。そうですね。一つはやっぱり1970年代になって公害問題というのがジャーナリズムで大きな問題になったっていうのがやっぱり解決に向かった大きな背景だと思います。井上さん。はい。
To understand this environmental pollution problem, I think in 1970s, the journalism played a big part to reveal this kind of problem in the society.
ですから、政府がすごくリードしたっていうことでもないし、民間がじゃあ、民間だけがやったかっていうのの、どっちでもないっていう感じがあります。どっちでもあるっていうか。
I can say it's safe to say that it's not neither government solely or public solely or either of them. Is that the answer?
ご存知かもしれないですけど、日本人って、目標が定まるとみんなまとまってそっちに動くので、その意味では批判されたくないっていう企業の意識もあって、70年代にすごく公害問題が解決に向かったっていうのはあると思います。
As you might know, the tendency of Japanese is that if there's one target, all of us will go to one target to achieve that goal. So not only the public, but also the companies, they want to do a good thing to the society. That's why maybe the companies or factories, they try to reduce that kind of pollution.
Thank you so much.
日本の解決策だけが、正しい解決策じゃなくて、もっと、民間ベースでやる方法もあるし、政府ベースでやる方法もあって、それはお国柄によって多分方向が違うんじゃないかなというふうに思います。以上です。
I think the solution, the Japanese solution in the 1970s, that doesn't apply to everyone, every country. It's safe to say that there is a different solution to each country.
Thank you so much. This afternoon has been so rich with information and most enjoyable. We give thanks to Professor Kurokata, Architect Kurokawa, Architect Miranda, and Engineer Hernandez for your insightful discussion, and to all our participants this afternoon for sending in all your questions. I'd like to revert to Tina for the closing. Thank you so much.
We thank all of you among our audiences for joining us this afternoon and for participating actively in our webinar this afternoon. And we hope that our dialogue continues and support a new awareness of built environment So in closing, the Metropolitan Museum of Manila and the Japan Foundation Manila would like to thank our speakers and presenters for excellent, excellent presentations. And those are the words of our audiences. I quote them. And for bringing new focus on withstanding disasters and responsive design. It's been a most productive afternoon. And as we come to a close for our webinar, we would like to invite again our audience for a post-webinar activity on our built environment. So may I ask Ms. Alec Abaro, the Education's Office of the Metropolitan Museum of Manila, to share a screen of this activity as a response to our webinar this afternoon. So thank you all, one and all, for joining us again. Alec?
Thank you, Ms. Tina. We've learned this afternoon that built environment pushes us to think of architecture as more than just the structure itself. It's also about the place it's in, what surrounds it, and the people it belongs to. So share with us a significant architectural structure or space you have photographed in the last 5 years that responds to our discussions this afternoon. Explain in no more than 200 words where you took the photo, a background about the place, and why you're submitting it as part of the Philippine built environment. Share it as a post on Facebook or Instagram from now until September 30. Like and tag the Metropolitan Museum of Manila and use the hashtag #OurBuiltEnvironment. We'll be selecting some of your submissions to be featured in an online album in our website and Facebook page. For inspiration, feel free to go on a virtual tour of the exhibition, Built Environment, An Alternative Guide to Japan, in our website. Thanks for joining us.